Hello and welcome to Your New Jersey. I'm Lisa Marie Falbo. On today's show, we are beginning to close out the summer and open our school books. Dina El Nabli of New Jersey Family is here to tell us how to get our kids school ready while kissing summer goodbye. But first, Wyckoff-based author Robert Skeed crafts educational stories for children to enjoy history lessons. When he isn't crafting stories, he provides author visits to schools all around the Garden State. Welcome, Robert, to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. My pleasure.
I love your hat. It's so fitting for what we're about to talk about. Love a good theme. Tell us what inspired you to become an author teaching history to children.
Oh, sure. Let me first start by saying I don't normally wear this hat. I wore it just for you today. Um, and what started my journey on writing American Revolution books was my dad had done our genealogy with my sister and discovered that we had an ancestor that fought and served during the American Revolution for the Continental Army and the Connecticut Militia. And my dad then became what's called a member of the Sons of the American Revolution. And the name of our ancestor that served in the Continental Army and Connecticut Militia is Lamberton Clark. And that was in the lineage of my dad's favorite grandfather. So he was pretty psyched when he discovered this. And then he got his Sons of the American Revolution certificate one day, and he invited me over to his house, and he said, you know, this is a great organization to be a part of. You know, you should join. And I said, Dad, that's pretty cool. I had an idea for an American Revolution's kid story years ago, but I never wrote it. And he's like, well, what's the idea? So what happened was I had visited the Van Allen house in Oakland, New Jersey when my kids were young. And that's where George Washington stayed for 2 days in July during 1777. And when I was there, my imagination kind of started going crazy because there I was in the door jamb that George Washington walked through. I was on the grounds where George Washington and the troops were. And I was in front of the fireplace where George Washington warmed himself in front of the fire. And my imagination just started going crazy, and I got an idea for a kid's book. But back then, I never wrote it. So I told my dad the kind of 30-second synopsis, we would call an elevator speech, of what that story was about. And he said, that's really cool. And I thought that was the end of the story. Then, to my amazement, about 3 days later, I got an email from my dad, and he was in his early 80s at the time. And he had taken that little nugget of a story idea that I gave him, and he mapped out an entire treatment of a story. So beginning, middle, and end. Here's what the characters are. Here's what they could experience, the conflict they went through. And as I read this email, I'm like, how did my dad do this? Not because he was elderly, but because I was kind of the writer in the family. And then I remembered that my dad had 70-something years of voracious reading behind him. And usually the best writers are also voracious readers. So I read this treatment. I was blown away by it. And just for fun, that evening, I banged out the first scene in the story in a book format. And then I emailed it to my dad. And just like any child would be, excited to get their approval and or reaction from their parent, I called him up and I'm like, Dad, go check your email. And then I waited and waited and waited. And, several minutes later, he called me back after he read it. And he said, that was fantastic. But then he said two words that really freaked me out. He said, keep going. And so that's what I did with my dad. We partnered day after day, week after week, based on his treatment and my own story ideas. We created a story together, which became the book Patriots, Redcoats, and Spies.
What a lovely backstory. And I remember feeling the same way. I visited George Washington, one of his retreats in Morristown, when I was a little kid, and I just remember being amazed at how low the ceilings were. I guess they were a lot shorter back then.
Yeah.
And when you were telling your story, it's just amazing to me what a role New Jersey played in the Revolutionary War, because I didn't know that he was living out in Oakland, New Jersey. How many spots did George Washington stay throughout our borders?
Yeah, well, as you know, there's the old saying, George Washington slept here. So throughout the colonies, George Washington, made appearances. In Oakland, he was there for 2 days on that trip. But back to your point about New Jersey's role in the American Revolution, there were more skirmishes and more, battles with the British and between the Continental Army and the militia than any other state in the colonies at that time. So, as New Jerseyans, we can be proud of the role our state played in the winning of the American Revolution.
We could be proud about a lot of things, but yes, certainly that as well. So you kept going. And I know as an author, I wrote a book and it's very hard to keep going because you get easily distracted as a writer, as I'm sure you know. Talk about how you built out the series from that first book.
Yeah, so our idea was to take little known elements of American history and use them as hooks and put an adventure around them to kind of draw kids and even adults into the story and into the learning. So, for example, my dad and I did a lot of research and we found out about the Culper Spy Ring. And so Patriots, Redcoats, and Spies deals with spying during the American Revolution. And then when you sell a book to a publisher, the question is, what's next? They like to have a series. So I was actually Googling one day and found out that there was a submarine invented during the American Revolution called the American Turtle Submarine. And I knew right away that was going to be the hook for the second book. And for the third book, we used a local kind of feat of creativity, which is the Great Chain at West Point. And if you've ever been to a West Point football game, you may have seen, if you toured the campus, they have 13 giant chain links in a circle representing the 13 colonies. And those are remnants of the Great Chain at West Point that they draped across the Hudson River to keep the British ships from going up. So they're kind of examples of three amazing feats of creativity during the American Revolution, because spying was an amazing feat of creativity. All the spies had to remain anonymous. Otherwise, if they got caught and captured, they were certainly going to be killed. Who would think that they could actually create a submarine that worked during the American Revolution? And certainly forging this giant chain was a feat of creativity as well. So my dad and I worked together, brainstorming the story ideas, writing together. There was a lot of brainstorming in his kitchen and near his family room on weekends and in evenings. A lot of emails going back and forth, a lot of Word documents going back and forth. And I always like to tell kids, if you think about a father-son fishing trip being a great bonding experience, writing a book with your dad is like that on steroids. And we drew closer to each other during the process. And, I hate to say it, being the good son, I always deferred to his judgment. There were times where he thought the story should go in one direction and I was kind of going in another. And I caved to his wishes and went in his direction, and he was always, always right. So it was a great experience.
I love just you reflecting on doing this with your father and what special memories you've both created. I can't imagine writing a book with my father or mother, but I'm more of like an isolated, like I need like to be in a cave writing, but every author is different, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. There definitely is the alone time, but there's a collaboration time as well. And nothing great happens alone. So it was, my son. I think he was, in late elementary school when Patriots, Redcoats, and Spies launched. And he said, "Dad, all your books are good, but Patriots, Redcoats, and Spies is the best because Grandpa helped you."
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Is your son now involved in your writing process? Are you passing the baton on?
No, I wish. I have two sons and a daughter. I'd love to do something with them someday. My daughter's exceptional at art. Maybe someday she'll do some illustrations for a book. That would be fun.
Well, speaking of kids, you take these books and you do author visits around New Jersey schools. Tell us what that entails.
Yeah, so currently I'm doing presentations on the American Revolution and specifically, like I mentioned before, the great feats of creativity during the American Revolution. So telling the stories of the three hooks of the books, talking about New Jersey's role in the American Revolution, talking about George Washington's leadership during the American Revolution and his principles of character, which is the reason why everyone loved and respected him so much. Also, I talk about how a book gets created, and if kids are too young to learn about the American Revolution, I do my standard author visit, which is just really talking to kids about the pros and cons of being a writer and how to create a story from beginning, middle to end. And basically whether it's about the American Revolution or just creative writing, I really try to encourage the kids to discover their own talents and develop them to have a fulfilled life.
Are students, the older ones, into the American Revolution?
Well, hopefully they will be even more soon, because I was in sixth grade in 1976 when the bicentennial happened, and we're getting ready to celebrate America's 250th birthday. So I'm hoping that schools will be really, really pumped up to get kids interested in the American Revolution. During my author visits, it's neat to find out that as soon as they hear about spying during the American Revolution, they really get hooked because everyone loves a good spy movie, a good action movie, a good James Bond movie, and to think that there was guys like James Bond without the whole high tech, but certainly risk takers, risking their lives for our liberties during the American Revolution is a tremendous interest gatherer. And then when they hear about the submarine and they hear about the Great Chain, they're totally even more interested in the American Revolution than maybe they were before I got there.
You talked at length about the submarine. Is that your favorite aspect of what you learned, or is there other aspects of the Revolutionary War that really connect with you?
Yeah, interestingly enough, the three feats of creativity featured in the books are what drew me in. But the thing I loved most about it was learning about George Washington. I'll use the term General George Washington because this is before he became president, obviously. And just when I learned, reading quotes about him from other people, how everyone respected his leadership, they respected him as a person, the way he treated other people, that to me was really fascinating. And not to mention that, he was a positive thinker. There are quotes that we've used of his in the book. When you're writing about George Washington, you want to make sure you nail that character. So, we used actual letters that he wrote to create a lot of his dialogue and so that we could know what his thinking was. But certainly that aspect of George Washington was what impressed me the most. And he had these rules of civility that he lived by, that he copied down when he was like 16 years old from a bunch of rules that Jesuits had created. And they're acts of behavior to keep someone civil. And I think by living by these rules of civility really impacted the way he behaved and how he was loved by others.
Talk about George Washington's supporting cast.
There's a couple of supporting characters. George Washington had the first bodyguards. They're called lifeguards. So Major Caleb Gibbs is a character in the story as a lifeguard, but the biggest one is Benjamin Talmadge. So Benjamin Talmadge was the gentleman charged with helping to create the Culper spy ring, and he plays a role in the series as well. And the fact that you could create a spy ring at that time, and Talmadge did what you and I would probably do if we were charged with creating a spy ring. He went to his like-minded friends in Setauket, Long Island, and recruited them to be spies for the cause of liberty. So there's some good sub-characters in the stories as well that are historical.
What do you have coming up next? Are you building upon the series even more?
Yeah, no, I think the series completed as a trilogy. That's kind of how we always envisioned it. We were fortunate. The first two books came out in hardcover in 2014. A year and a half ago, Knox Press, a New Jersey press, picked up the rights to the stories and published the first two in paperback so more people could afford them. They also picked up the third story in the series called Links to Liberty, Defending the Great Chain at West Point. And if we were to do anything, it would probably be a prequel. We kind of wrapped up the series, and the third book was so important because there were questions in books 1 and 2 that were left unanswered intentionally, and the third book answers those questions. And as far as what's next, in November of this year, 2023, I have a new book coming out called The Bat Boy and the Unbreakable Record, and it features the back-to-back no-hitters pitched by Johnny Vandermeer in 1938. And Johnny Vandermeer was brought up in Midland Park, New Jersey, where I lived for 9 years.
I'm obsessed with that. You got to give a little plug. I mean, we're in baseball season now, so tell us what this book will feature.
So it's the tale of a bat boy for the Cincinnati Reds whose father has a broken leg, and unfortunately he's got to go to work at age 12. And he thinks he's applying for a job in a woodworking shop because that's how the Reds positioned it. They didn't want to get flooded with kids wanting to be the bat boy for the Reds. So they wanted to kind of get kids who really needed to work. So he unfortunately has to go to work as a 12-year-old to help his family out. And then surprisingly enough, he lands a job as the bat boy for the Cincinnati Reds. And he goes through lots of troubles at school as being the bat boy. but ultimately he learns the gift of encouragement, which helps him befriend and then help Johnny Vandermeer, the pitcher for the Reds, achieve what at that time the Cincinnati Post called the greatest feat in the game's history, which is pitching back-to-back no-hitters. It's a record that probably won't be tied and certainly won't be broken. And so I'm excited for more people to learn about the story. And this came about because when I lived in Midland Park, I became friends with Johnny Vandermeer's boyhood best friend. His name was Dick Jeffer. And before he died at the age of 96, he asked me to do everything I could to keep the memory of his friend and the record alive. And one of the best ways I could think of doing that was to write a kid's book about it. And fortunately, it's being published by Artemisia Publishing. And as I mentioned, it comes out in November.
And is this what you do full time? You write books all day? Because that's the coolest life ever, if that's the case.
Yeah, I wish. That's a dream. Lots of authors do have day jobs. I've spent my career also working in corporate communications, and spending, all my free time when I get a big idea, writing stories. But, if a book takes off, I would certainly love to be behind this desk writing stories all day.
I agree with you. Of all the different media jobs that I have, writing is the most fun.
Yeah. Yeah, you get to, be with these characters and use your imagination, and nothing great happens alone. After you write it, you need other people to edit and critique your stories. But certainly that time spent in front of the computer with just your imagination and divine inspiration, fun things happen.
Robert, this was so much fun. Thank you for reaching out to me over Instagram and for pitching this wonderful interview for the show. I'm so happy we got together to do this.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for including me.
Where can people find out more about you and all of your books?
So my website is my name. It's Robert Skeed. That's spelled SKEAD.com. And my books are available wherever, as they say, wherever books are sold.
Robert, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your summer and best of luck to you with your book launch in the fall.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa.
If you're a parent in the Garden State, I'm sure you're trying to figure out how to savor the last bit of summer while also getting your kids school ready. Well, Dina El-Nably, the editorial director and co-owner of New Jersey Family Magazine, is here to tell us how to navigate this transitional time. Dina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us, Lisa Marie. It's great to be here.
So camp is over. Summer activities are done, and parents over the last couple of weeks have been scrambling trying to fill up these dog days of summer. What do you have on the calendar that you can share with families?
One of our favorite traditions at the end of the summer, as you know, New Jersey farms are unlike any other, and we love them for their produce, but we also love them for their flowers. And the flower at the end of the summer that we are all obsessed with is the sunflower. And there are so many farms now. Peak bloom for sunflowers is mid-August through mid-September. And the OG sunflower farm in New Jersey is the Sussex County Sunflower Maze. It's in its 13th anniversary year. And it's not just a farm, it's a maze. So it's like throngs of varieties of different lengths and heights of sunflowers. It's gorgeous it's a perfect place to take your babies for pictures. So that's in Sandyston in Sussex County. You can go on their Facebook page at Sunflowers NJ to check out the times and the details, local, family owned. And there's so many others. Von Thune Farms has a New Jersey Sunflower Trail in Washington Township, also beautiful. Happy Day Farm in Manalapan to pick your own. And another favorite farm that I think all our viewers know and love is Holland Ridge. It's kind of famous for its tulips, but it's also fantastic in the fall for sunflowers. And they really have amazing props to take that perfect Instagram picture.
And a few weeks back, we had Allstead Farms on to talk about their Sunflower Festival as well, and about all the great pick-your-own options that the Garden State has. And I didn't realize this, but in the summer, peaches are grown more in New Jersey than even in Georgia.
Isn't that amazing? I love it. That's why we were called the Garden State. The pick-your-own varieties are amazing. Peaches, and then heading into beyond peaches, apples, all these farms, apples, pumpkins in the fall. But I love that you pointed that out because it's true, and a lot of people don't know about it. So the pick your own options here are fantastic in the fall.
So besides visiting New Jersey's farms, which could really take up those dog days of summer, what else is on the docket?
I just think it's never too late to. I think every family in New Jersey wants to squeeze in their last beach days. I know I do. And, if you've already taken your vacation, plan a day trip. My favorite spot geographically for a day trip is Long Branch, just because it's so accessible, 90 minutes from North Jersey, New York City, easy to get to. And it's the perfect beach for a combination relaxing beach day, but also has the high end shops and food spots that of Pure Village. The shopping there, I think, is so unique and unlike any other beach town. And the Seven Presidents Park has all the guarded swimming, the surfing, the water activities. So you get all that, ocean beauty, but then you get the shopping, the food. The Wave Resort has a great restaurant, like a really fun carousel across the street. There's outdoor concerts all summer. And heading into this weekend on the 26th, the Long Branch Jazz and Blues Festival, live music, fireworks, food trucks. So it's a fantastic option for a day trip.
You mentioned food a lot in the things to do, and I know that New Jersey Family magazine recently featured one of the premier chefs in the Garden State, Chef David Burke, and all of the restaurants that keep popping up, and his restaurants are kid-friendly, right?
Yes. And we interviewed him recently and asked him about what you do to when you have a kid who's a picky eater. And he just said, don't talk about it. He had 3 kids. They're grown now. But they were picky too. Just don't talk about it too much, and just let them be. And then on their own, they'll be adventurous. But yes, his restaurants are fantastic. He has 8 locations in New Jersey and has talked about investing in New Jersey. He's known internationally, and he started in New York City, and he's even got a restaurant in Saudi Arabia and all over the country. But he's proudly investing in New Jersey, and he's seeing that people here really do love and appreciate a good meal. The locally sourced seasonal ingredients here, the produce is fantastic. And we just recently visited Orchard Park, which also has the Chateaubriand. Overnight it's in the hotel. They do events there. That should be on everyone's outdoor dining bucket list. The food there is fantastic, and the bacon on a clothesline. Everybody in New Jersey needs to try that.
And then for dessert, he does the cotton candy. So what kid doesn't like cotton candy? I mean, maybe the parents don't like the sugar rush, but the kids certainly like that dessert. So right now, also, there's a lot of anxiety for some students about going back to school. And I know New Jersey Family Magazine has covered that extensively, how to get your child ready and how to get them prepared. What tips do you have?
So we have a annual Big Book of Education magazine that mails to our readers around now, late August, early September. And really, it's just about getting them back into their routine and not waiting until the day before, or starting the routine earlier, getting them back into a regular sleep pattern. If they're new to a school, making sure you visit the school before school starts, getting them back into a habit of reading if they haven't already been reading. Getting them back with school friends if they've been away at camp or on vacation, setting up those play dates, just kind of slowly acclimating them back to the routine that is school, whether it's through the sleeping schedule, whether it's through meeting up with friends, getting a look at the school itself, and also just not talking too much about it because that can promote anxiety. Just kind of weaving that stuff in naturally, I think, is great. But for tips about that, we have a lot of experts that we talk to about the school anxiety and the pre-jitters, and you can find them all on our website, njfamily.com. We do a lot of that coverage at the end of the month and into September. We've seen data from our sources that a record number of kids are getting mental health resources. They're talking about it, which is so important because the depression rates have gone up. So we have a lot of tips on our site about signs to look for if your kid is, more anxious than, norm, or shows signs of depression, or shows signs that can be really worrisome, and a list of resources to call to seek out help. One of the problems is mental health is really hard to come by, and it's not cheap. But there are a lot of resources through the state and through your local school. Talk to your school counselor, talk to your school psychologist, your child study team. Keep the lines of communication open with your child's teacher, and never assume anything. Always just check in with your child. The best thing is to just keep the lines of communication open and talk to your child regularly about how they're doing.
And now is the time to have those conversations, right? Especially if you're if your child is going through something over the summer, I think probably now is the time to talk to their guidance counselor, their teachers.
Yeah, I find reaching out proactively is always a great idea. If you have concerns, letting them know from the beginning of the year. My child has shown some signs of anxiety, has shown had a tough year last year, or this has been a particular challenge for them. There's this social aspect I want you to be aware of. If you letting them know up front is your best bet, and just that way the teacher knows to look out for it, and I think it starts a relationship off on a good foot for your child.
Dina, thank you so much for coming on here. And we want to have you back in the fall, later in the fall, to talk holidays, because that is a jam-packed calendar for sure.
We can't wait. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for watching another episode of Your New Jersey. I'm Lisa Marie Falbo. We'll see you back here next week.